My father skipped my wedding because he said he had a golf tournament he could not miss. I stood at the altar alone while he was putting on the 18th hole. But yesterday, when my face hit the cover of Forbes magazine, next to the headline, $600 million Empress, my phone lit up with a message from him. It was 3 words. Family dinner. Urgent. He thought I was coming home to write a check to save his crumbling reputation. He had no idea I was walking into that dining room with an eviction notice in my purse. Before I tell you how I bought my own father's debt and made him beg for mercy, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind your family that respect is a currency they cannot overdraw. My name is Zuri King, and for 32 years I was the invisible daughter. I was the shadow in the hallway, while my sister Chloe was the light in the living room. I was the mistake my father Marcus King never let me forget. I sat in my penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline, the city lights reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling glass. The air in my apartment was perfectly conditioned, scented with sandalwood and expensive silence. On the marble island in my kitchen lay that magazine, my face, my empire, Onyx Hotels. I had built it from nothing, scrubbing floors and balancing books, while my family pretended I did not exist. I took a sip of my wine, a vintage red, that cost more than the tuition my father refused to pay for me, and looked at his text message again. Urgent. For Marcus King, urgent meant he needed money. It meant the facade of the King family dynasty was cracking and he needed mortar. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked the number and gone back to staring at the beautiful, lonely city I had conquered. But there is a pull to the place that broke you, a gravitational force that drags you back to see if the monsters are still as big as you remember. I grabbed my clutch, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, and smoothed down the lapel of my cream-colored silk suit. I did not dress for a family dinner. I dressed for a takeover. The drive from my penthouse in the Loop to the old family estate in Highland Park was a journey through time. As I navigated my Porsche through the iron gates of King Estates, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. From the street, the mansion looked imposing. It was a massive brick colonial that screamed old money and prestige. But as I pulled up the long, winding driveway, the headlights of my car revealed the truth. The hedges were overgrown. The paint on the window shutters was peeling. There were weeds pushing through the cracks and the cobblestones stubborn and ugly. It was just like the family inside. Grand on the outside, rotting on the in. I parked my Porsche right next to my father's vintage Jaguar, making sure the contrast was impossible to miss. His car was a relic of the past, polished but tired. Mine was the future. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold Chicago air, and walked up the steps. I did not knock. I still had a key, though I had not used it in 4 years. The moment I stepped into the foyer, the temperature dropped. The house smelled of lemon polish and desperation. Well, look who finally decided to show up. The voice came from the drawing room. Brad, my brother-in-law. He was leaning against the doorframe, holding a tumbler of scotch, wearing a linen suit that was wrinkled in all the wrong places. Brad was the kind of man who married into a black family and thought it gave him a pass to say things he shouldn't. He thought he was the prince of this kingdom just because he was white and knew how to flatter my father. I ignored him and kept walking, my heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors. "I am talking to you, Zuri," Brad said, stepping in front of me to block my path. He looked me up and down, his lip curling in a sneer that he probably practiced in the mirror. "I see you rented a nice car for the evening, trying to impress us? Or did you just drive the company car home from your little hotel job?" I stopped. I looked him dead in the eye. "It is a Porsche, Brad. And I own it. Just like I own the building where you buy your cheap suits. Now move." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Feisty. I like it. But do not get comfortable. Marcus is in a mood. And Chloe is... well, you know Chloe." As if on cue, a shrill voice echoed from the top of the grand staircase. "Zuri, do not just stand there gossiping with my husband. Get up here. I looked up. My sister Chloe was standing on the landing. She looked like a disco ball that had exploded. She was wearing a silver sequined gown that dragged on the floor, diamonds dripping from her ears, her hair piled high on her head. She was 2 years younger than me, but acted like she was the queen mother. I walked up the stairs not because she told me to, but because I wanted to see the train wreck up close. When I reached the top, she didn't hug me. She didn't say hello. She turned her back to me and pointed at the trailing fabric of her dress. Grab the hem, she commanded. This dress cost $20,000, and the maid quit this morning because she is lazy. I need you to carry it while I walk down to dinner. Dad wants to make a grand entrance. I stared at her back. This was the dynamic. This had always been the dynamic. Chloe was the star and I was the stagehand. I am not your maid, Chloe, I said, my voice calm. And that dress is last season. She spun around, her eyes narrowing. Excuse me. You should be grateful we even invited you. Dad read some article about you and said we had to be nice. I told him it was probably a mistake that you probably paid the magazine to feature you. There is no way you built a hotel chain. You could not even organize your own closet when we were kids. She brushed past me, her dress rustling aggressively. Just try not to embarrass us tonight, Zuri. We have standards to maintain. I watched her descend the stairs, clinging to the banister like she was in a soap opera. Standards. The irony was suffocating. I followed them into the dining room. The table was set for 4. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, heavy porcelain plates. It was a scene straight out of a magazine from the 1950s. My father was already seated at the head of the table, Marcus King, the patriarch, the legend in his own mind. He did not stand up when I entered. He did not smile. He was cutting a piece of steak with surgical precision, his eyes focused on the meat. Sit, he said. It was not an invitation, it was an order. I pulled out the chair opposite him, the spot usually reserved for guests, or in this family, the accused. Brad and Chloe sat on the sides, smirking at each other like high school bullies. I sat down, placing my clutch on the table. The sound of the leather hitting the wood made my father look up. His eyes were cold, dark, and assessing. He looked at my suit, my hair, the watch on my wrist. He was calculating my net worth in his head. You are late, he said. I am busy, I replied. Running a corporation takes time, Marcus. You used to know that, didn't you? Before you started spending all your time at the country club. Brad choked on his drink. Chloe gasped. No one spoke to Marcus King like that. My father put down his knife and fork. He picked up a napkin and dabbed the corner of his mouth slowly. You have a sharp tongue, Zuri. I see the business world has hardened you. Good. You will need that hardness. He reached under the table and pulled out a thick leather folder. He tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the polished wood until it hit my water glass. I did not call you here for pleasantries, he said. I called you here because it is time you stopped playing shopkeeper and came back to the fold. I looked at the folder. The gold lettering on the front read, King Estates, Merger and Acquisition. What is this? I asked. It is your future, my father said. I have prepared the paperwork. We are merging your little hotel venture with King Estates. You have had your fun, you have made a little name for yourself, but you are a woman, Zuri. You are emotional, you are fragile. The market is about to turn, and you are going to lose everything if you do not have a strong hand guiding you. He gestured to Brad. Brad here has a vision. He is going to take over as CEO of the combined entity. You will step down, retain a seat on the board, purely ceremonial of course, and we will manage the assets. It is for your own protection. I felt the blood boil in my veins, hot and fast. He wanted to steal my company. He wanted to take the one thing I had built with my own blood and sweat, the one thing that proved I was worth something, and hand it to the man who thought I was the caterer. I laughed. It started as a chuckle and grew into a full, loud laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. You are joking, I said. You want me to give my $600 million company to him, to Brad? The man who failed the bar exam 3 times. Brad slammed his hand on the table. Hey. My father's face did not change. He was a statue of arrogance. It is not a request, Zuri. It is a demand. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, violating every etiquette rule he had ever taught me. And if I say no, if I walk out that door and go back to my life, what are you going to do? Marcus ground me. My father smiled. It was a terrifying, thin smile that did not reach his eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a second envelope. This one was manila, worn at the edges. If you walk out that door, he said softly, sliding the envelope toward me, I will release these. I opened the envelope. Inside were photos. Photos of me from 4 years ago. Me in a hospital gown. Me sitting in a therapist's office crying. Me looking broken after Mom died. You were very unstable back then, Zuri, my father said, his voice dripping with fake concern. Suicidal, even. I have statements from doctors. I have testimony from family members. If you do not sign the merger papers, I will file a petition with the court tomorrow morning. I will claim you are having a mental breakdown. I will show them these photos. I will tell them you are a danger to yourself and your business. He leaned back, crossing his arms. I will get a conservatorship, Zuri, just like they did to those pop stars. I will take control of your money, your company, your house, and your life. And I will do it because I love you. So be a good girl. Pick up the pen and sign the papers. The silence in the dining room was heavy enough to crush bones. I looked at the man who gave me life, and all I saw was a predator. The photos on the table were not just images. They were a violation. They were taken during the darkest weeks of my life, right after Mom died of cancer. I was 28, grieving, and yes, I saw a therapist because I was depressed. I trusted my father to handle the funeral arrangements while I fell apart. Now he was framing my grief as insanity. He was weaponizing my mourning period to steal my life's work. You are bluffing, I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady. No judge will grant you a conservatorship over a CEO who just made the cover of Forbes. I run a global empire, Marcus. I am not a child. Marcus took a sip of his wine, unbothered. Judges are people, Zuri. And people believe what they see. I have Dr. Evans willing to testify that your recent success is actually a symptom of mania. Hyperfocus, erratic spending, delusions of grandeur. He has been building a file on you for months based on my reports. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dr. Evans was our family doctor. He was the one who prescribed me antidepressants back then. Marcus had bought him. Chloe chimed in, leaning forward with a look of fake concern that made my stomach turn. It is for your own good, Zuri. We are worried about you. You work too much. You do not have a husband. You are alone in that big penthouse. We just want to take the burden off your shoulders so you can rest. Brad can handle the heavy lifting at Onyx. I looked at Brad. He was busy checking his reflection in his spoon, already imagining himself sitting in my corner office. You think you can run Onyx? I asked him, my voice dripping with disdain. You bankrupted a frozen yogurt franchise in 6 months, Brad. My hotels require actual intelligence. Brad dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly against the china. Watch your mouth, Zuri. Once Marcus signs those papers, I will be the one signing your allowance checks. If you are nice, maybe I will let you keep the Porsche. If not, you can take the bus to your therapy sessions. I stood up. My chair scraped violently against the floor. I am leaving, and I am contacting my lawyer. Sit down, Marcus roared. His fist slammed onto the table, making the wine glasses jump. You walk out that door without signing, and by tomorrow morning, TMZ will have these photos. By noon, your board of directors will be calling for your resignation. By evening, the stock price of Onyx will be in free fall. Do you really want to destroy your company just to prove a point? I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. He had me. He knew exactly where to hit. If he released those medical records and filed the petition, even if I eventually won in court, the scandal would tank my company's valuation. Investors hate instability. He was holding my legacy hostage. I looked around the table. My father the tyrant, my sister the parasite, my brother-in-law the fool. They were not family. They were a pack of wolves encircling a wounded deer. But they forgot one thing. I was not a deer. I was a lioness who had been sleeping. I need time, I said, lowering my voice to a whisper. I forced my shoulders to slump, feigning defeat. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to lower their guard. Marcus softened immediately. He thought he had broken me. Of course. I am not a monster, Zuri. Read the contract. Review the terms. It is a standard transfer of assets. I picked up the heavy leather folder. It felt like holding a grenade. 24 hours, I said. I will have my answer for you tomorrow night. Marcus smiled, that cold, shark-like smile. Make it the anniversary gala tomorrow. We can announce the merger on stage. A united family front. It will be beautiful. I nodded slowly, tucking the blackmail photos into my purse along with the contract. Beautiful, I repeated. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could hear Brad snickering as I reached the foyer. She folded faster than a cheap suit, Brad said. I told you she was weak, Marcus replied. I stepped out into the cold night air and closed the heavy oak door behind me. The moment the latch clicked, I stopped acting. I straightened my spine. I wiped the fake look of fear from my eyes and replaced it with pure cold rage. They wanted a merger, I would give them a hostile takeover. They wanted to talk about mental health, I was about to drive them crazy. I marched to my car, threw the folder onto the passenger seat, and gunned the engine. The Porsche roared to life, shattering the quiet of the estate. As I tore down the driveway, leaving tire marks on their pristine pavement, I dialed a number on my car's display. Dante, wake up! My lawyer's voice was groggy. Zuri. It is 10 p.m. Are you okay? No, I said, merging onto the highway and speeding back toward the city. I am not okay. My father just declared war. He threatened me with a conservatorship. There was a pause on the line. Then Dante's voice shifted from sleepy to sharp. He did what he wants, my company, Dante. He wants to give it to Brad. And he has Dr. Evans in his pocket. I checked the rearview mirror, watching the King estate disappear into the darkness. I need you to open the vault, Dante. The file we made on King Estates, the debt research, the shadow accounts. Everything we found but were too afraid to use, Zuri, Dante warned. That is the nuclear option. If we go down that road, there is no coming back. You will destroy him. You will bankrupt your own father. I gripped the steering wheel tight. He is not my father anymore. He is just a bad investment. Initiate protocol Nemesis. I want to buy every cent of debt he owes. By the time I walk into that gala tomorrow, I want to own the shirt on his back. Consider it done, Dante said. I hung up and pressed the accelerator. The city lights of Chicago appeared on the horizon, glittering like diamonds. They thought they had trapped a helpless daughter. They had no idea they had just handed the keys to the executioner. The sun hadn't even risen over Lake Michigan when the war began. I was sitting in the back of my town car, a cup of black coffee, trembling slightly in my hand, not from caffeine, but from pure, unadulterated rage. My phone had been vibrating non-stop since 4 in the morning. I swiped the screen to unlock it, and there it was. The headline that my father had promised. The Chicago Tribune business section ran with it first. Onyx Empress crumbles, questions swirl around. CEO Zuri, King's mental stability. I clicked the link. The photo was grainy, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from a distance but unmistakable. It was me 4 years ago, sitting on a park bench outside Dr. Evans' clinic, with my head in my hands, weeping. It was the day I realized my mother was never coming back. But the caption didn't say that. The caption read, "Sources close to the family report a long history of manic episodes and erratic behavior. Is the $600 million hotel chain safe in her hands?" I threw the phone onto the leather seat next to me. He didn't wait 24 hours. He didn't even wait 12. Marcus King had pressed the nuclear button while I was sleeping. When the elevator doors opened to the 42nd floor of the Onyx Tower, the chaos hit me like a physical wave. Usually my headquarters was a sanctuary of hushed tones and efficient movement. Today it sounded like a trading floor during a crash. Phones were ringing off the hook. My staff was running back and forth with panicked expressions. Elena, my executive assistant, met me at the elevator bank. She looked pale. Zuri, thank God you are here. It is a bloodbath. Walk with me, I said, marching toward my office without breaking stride. Give me the numbers. Elena struggled to keep up with my pace. Our stock opened at $42. It is currently trading at 38. We have lost nearly 8% in pre-market trading. The board of directors has called an emergency meeting for noon. They want a statement. They want to know if the rumors about a conservatorship are true. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of my office and threw my coat onto the sofa. Tell the board I will address them personally at the gala tonight. Tell them the rumors are a hostile takeover attempt by a competitor. But Zuri Elena stammered, closing the door behind her. It is not a competitor. The quotes in the article. They are from anonymous family members. They are saying you are unfit. I stood behind my desk, looking out at the city that felt a little less mine than it did yesterday. I know who they are, Elena. Get Dante on the line. Tell him to accelerate the purchase. I don't care what it costs. If my father wants to play dirty, I'm going to bury him in mud. Before Elena could leave, the private line on my desk began to ring. Only 3 people had that number. 1 was my lawyer, 2 were my enemies. I looked at the caller ID. It was Chloe. I picked up the receiver and held it to my ear, saying nothing. Oh, Zuri. Chloe's voice came through, dripping with a sweetness that tasted like poison. I am watching the news right now. You look absolutely tragic in that photo. Was that the day you wore those terrible sweatpants to the funeral home? I always told you that you had no sense of occasion. I sat down in my leather chair, swiveling it to face the window. What do you want, Chloe? I am calling to check on you, sis. We are all so worried. Dad is beside himself. He says he feels terrible about having to leak those photos, but you left him no choice. You were acting so irrational last night. He had to protect the family legacy. I gripped the phone cord, winding it around my finger until it turned purple. He is trying to tank my stock price so he can buy me out for pennies, Chloe. Do not pretend this is about love. This is about robbery. Chloe laughed, a light, airy sound that made my skin crawl. Don't be dramatic. It is already working, isn't it? Brad showed me the ticker. You are losing millions by the minute. Just sign the papers, Zuri. End the suffering. Brad has been looking at the floor plans for the estate. We were thinking once you step down and move back home, you can stay in the guest house. The guest house. She meant the converted garage where we used to store the lawnmowers. You want me to live in the garage? Well, we can't have you in the main house, Chloe said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Not with your condition. It wouldn't be safe for the children. But don't worry. Brad said he would let you keep a small allowance. Enough for your therapy and maybe some knitting supplies. You need a hobby, Zuri. Being a CEO clearly is too stressful for your fragile mind. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. They were enjoying this. They were feasting on my destruction. They genuinely believed that by humiliating me, they were elevating themselves. Is that all, Chloe? Actually, no, she chirped. Brad is on his way over to your office. He wants to measure the corner office for drapes. He says the modern look is too cold. He wants something more regal. Be a dear and let him in, won't you? It would be a shame if he had to call security to escort you out of your own building before the ink is even dry. I opened my eyes. The reflection in the window showed a woman who looked tired, yes, but not broken. Never broken. Tell Brad to come, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I will be waiting. I hung up the phone with a slam that echoed through the silent office. Elena was staring at me, her eyes wide with fear. Zuri, is he really coming here, Brad? Yes, I said, standing up and smoothing down my skirt. He is coming to measure the drapes. I walked over to the wall safe hidden behind a painting of the Chicago skyline. I punched in the code and the heavy steel door swung open. Inside was not money but a single encrypted hard drive and a stack of files that Dante had delivered late last night. The files contained the autopsy of King Estates. Every bribe, every unpaid tax bill, every dirty loan my father had taken to keep up appearances. I pulled out the files and placed them on my desk. Elena, cancel my lunch. Cancel the press conference. What are you going to do? She asked. I am going to welcome my brother-in-law, I said, tracing the edge of the file with my finger. And then I am going to remind him that in the jungle the lion does not negotiate with the hyena. The intercom buzzed. Ms. King Security is on line 1. There is a Mr. Bradley Pearson in the lobby. He claims he is the new acting CEO and is demanding access to the executive elevator. He has a camera crew with him. Of course he brought a camera crew. They wanted to film my walk of shame. They wanted to broadcast my eviction to the world. Let him up, I said. But Ms. King? Let him up, I repeated, my voice cutting through the intercom like a blade. And send the security footage to my private server. If he wants a show, I will give him a show. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the streets of Chicago. The cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. My father and sister thought they could crush me because they remembered the girl I used to be. The girl who sought their approval, the girl who cried in parks. They forgot that I built this tower. I poured the concrete. I welded the steel. And I knew exactly where the trapdoors were. The elevator chimed down the hall. I heard Brad's loud, obnoxious voice, booming, before I even saw him. Film everything I want the shareholders to see that I am taking charge. I turned around, leaning against my desk, crossing my arms. I waited. The door to my office flew open. Brad strode in, flanked by 2 cameramen and a terrified-looking receptionist. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny, a tie that was too wide, and a grin that was too confident. Zuri, he shouted, spreading his arms as if he were welcoming me to his home. Packing up already, good girl. He walked past me, running his hand along the leather sofa, inspecting the artwork. He didn't look at me. He looked at the room. He was already mentally redecorating. This will do, he said to the camera. We will need to get rid of this feminine furniture, obviously. Get a humidor in here. Maybe a putting green in the corner. He finally turned to me, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. You look tired, Zuri. Rough night. I guess it is hard to sleep when you know the gravy train has derailed. He walked up to my desk, picked up the nameplate that read, Zuri King, CEO, and tossed it into the trash can. Oops, he smirked. Clumsy me. But you won't be needing that anymore. Marcus signed the petition an hour ago. The court hearing is set for Monday, but until then, as the designated trustee, I am assuming operational control. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of peppermint and entitlement. You can go now, Zuri. Go to the garage. Chloe picked out a nice cot for you. I looked at the trash can where my nameplate lay. Then I looked at Brad. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give the cameras the breakdown they were hungry for. Instead, I smiled. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it drags you under. You are right, Brad, I said softly. This office does need a change. I reached for the phone. But before you start measuring for drapes, you might want to call your wife. I think her credit card just got declined at Saks Fifth Avenue. Brad frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. What are you talking about? I am talking about leverage, Brad. You think you walked into a surrender? You walked into a minefield. I pressed the button on the phone. Security. Remove the trespassers. And Brad. He froze as 2 burly guards appeared in the doorway behind him. When you get downstairs, check your email. I just bought the mortgage on your house. You are late on payment. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Get out of my building, I whispered. Before I foreclose on your life. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the marble nightstand. It was not a gentle alarm. It was a relentless, continuous buzzing that signaled a catastrophe. It was 5 in the morning. I reached for the device, my eyes adjusting to the harsh blue light of the screen. I expected a follow-up threat from my father. What I found was much worse. The headline on the Chicago Business Journal screamed in bold black letters. Onyx Empress unstable questions swirl around CEO Zuri, King mental health. I sat up, the silk sheet sliding off my body, a cold shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I clicked the link. There was a photo of me taken 4 years ago outside a grief counseling center. My eyes were swollen, my hair messy, my posture defeated. It was the week after my mother was buried. I remembered that day. I had just signed the papers for her cremation, and I felt like my lungs had collapsed. I was human. I was grieving. But the caption below the photo did not mention grief. It read, "Sources close to the family express deep concern over Ms. King's erratic behavior and potential psychotic episodes. Investors worry the $600 million hotel chain is being steered by a captain who has lost her grip on reality. They did not just threaten me, they executed the hit." I threw the covers off and marched to the shower. I did not cry. I did not scream. I turned the water to freezing cold and stood under it until my skin was numb. They wanted a breakdown. They wanted me to hide in my penthouse and refuse to answer the door. I would do neither. I dressed in my sharpest armor. A charcoal gray suit, stiletto heels that clicked like gunshots, and a layer of red lipstick that signaled war. By the time I stepped out of the elevator onto the 42nd floor of the Onyx Tower, the atmosphere was suffocating. Usually my office was a sanctuary of hushed efficiency, a place where deals were made and futures were secured. Today it smelled of fear. Phones were ringing off the hook. My staff huddled in corners, whispering, their eyes darting toward me and then quickly away. When they saw me, they stopped. Some looked down at their shoes. Others looked at me with pity. Pity was the one thing I despised more than hatred. Elena, my executive assistant, met me at the door. She was trembling, holding a tablet against her chest like a shield. Her face was pale, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "Zuri," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "The board is calling an emergency meeting at noon. The stock is down 12% in pre-market trading. They are talking about freezing your voting rights until a medical evaluation can be performed." I walked past her into my office and slammed my briefcase onto the desk. The sound echoed through the room, making Elena jump. "Tell them I will address them at the gala tonight," I said, my voice steady and cold. "And tell them if anyone sells a single share before then, I will personally ensure they are blacklisted from every luxury hotel in North America." "But, Zuri," Elena stammered, following me into the room. "The rumors. They are saying your father has filed for a conservatorship. They are saying you are a liability. The investors are pulling out. We have lost 3 major contracts in the last hour alone." I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the Chicago skyline. The city looked gray and unforgiving under the morning mist. My reflection in the glass looked back at me, unyielding. "My father is a liability, Elena. I am the asset. Now get out. I need to make a call." She nodded and closed the door, leaving me in the silence of my office. But the silence didn't last long. The private line on my desk began to ring. It was a number I knew too well. It was the only number that had been calling me relentlessly since the article dropped. I picked up the receiver and held it to my ear, saying nothing. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." It was Chloe. Her voice was bright, chipper, sickeningly sweet. It was the voice she used when she wanted to borrow a Birkin bag or ask for a loan she would never repay. It was the voice of a woman who thought she had already won the lottery. "Did you see the paper?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "We are all just devastated, Zuri. Dad has been crying all morning. He hates that it has come to this. He hates that the world has to know about your condition. But he had a duty to the shareholders." I gripped the phone tight, my knuckles turning white. "There is no condition, Chloe. Unless you count the knife you just stabbed in my back." "Oh, stop it!" She laughed, a light, airy sound that made my stomach turn. We are helping you. Look at the stock price. It is plummeting. You are losing millions by the minute. By noon, your company will be worth half of what it was yesterday. Dad is doing you a favor by offering to buy you out now. Sign the papers, Zuri. End the pain. Why do you always have to make things so difficult? I looked at the ticker on my computer screen. She was right about one thing. The red line was diving. My net worth was bleeding out. Every second I stayed on the phone, I was losing more money than most people made in a lifetime. I will never sign, I said. Chloe sighed, the sound of a disappointed parent dealing with a toddler. We thought you might say that. That is why Brad is on his way to see you. I froze. The name hung in the air like a foul odor. Brad. My incompetent, arrogant brother-in-law. The man who couldn't manage a lemonade stand, let alone a hospitality empire. Why is Brad coming to my office? To help you pack, silly, Chloe said. Since Dad filed the petition this morning, Brad is technically the acting trustee until the hearing on Monday. He wants to make sure you do not damage any company property during your episodes. He even cleared out the guest house for you. You know, the one behind the garage? It is cozy. We put a cot in there. It will be perfect for your recovery. The garage. They wanted to put the CEO of Onyx Hotels in a garage. The audacity was breathtaking. They didn't just want my money, they wanted my humiliation. They wanted to strip me of everything I had built and shove me back into the dirt they thought I belonged in. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of joy. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the prey has just walked into the trap. Tell Brad I am waiting, I said softly. Oh, he is already in the lobby, Chloe chirped. Be nice to him, Zuri. He is your boss now. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought the article, the stock drop, and the conservatorship petition were the end of the game. They did not know I had spent the entire night with my lawyer Dante buying up the toxic debt that fueled their lavish lifestyle. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Elena. Yes, Zuri Security just alerted me that Brad is in the lobby with a camera crew. I paused. I could hear Elena holding her breath on the other end of the line. Let him up, I said. But Zuri, Elena whispered, he has reporters with him. He wants to film you leaving. Let him up, I repeated, my voice cutting through the static. And Elena, yes, prepare the conference room. And bring me the file labeled Nemesis. I walked over to the mirror and fixed my lipstick. My father wanted a show. Chloe wanted a tragedy. Brad wanted a coronation. I checked my watch. It was 8 in the morning. The markets were bleeding. My reputation was in tatters, and my family was coming to pick the bones. Perfect. I sat down in my leather chair, opened the Nemesis file, and waited for the elevator to ding. The smear campaign was their opening move, but they forgot one rule of business. When you try to bury a seed, you do not destroy it. You just help it grow. And I was about to bloom into their worst nightmare. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a descent into hell. Every floor that passed was a reminder of what I had built and what was currently under siege. When the silver doors slid open on the ground floor, the first thing I saw was the light. Not the warm ambient lighting I had carefully curated for the Onyx lobby, but the harsh, blinding flash of paparazzi cameras. And standing in the center of the chaos like a ringmaster in a cheap circus was Brad. He was not just standing there, he was performing. He had positioned himself right in front of the central fountain, a black marble sculpture commissioned from a renowned artist in Harlem. Brad was leaning against it, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing wildly as he barked orders at my staff. The camera crew he had hired was circling him, capturing every moment of his fabricated authority. I stepped out of the elevator, my heels silent on the plush carpet, and stopped behind a pillar to assess the damage. Brad was currently focused on Mr. Henderson. James Henderson was 65 years old. He was a man of immense dignity, a former history professor who had fallen on hard times before I hired him to run the concierge desk 5 years ago. He was the soul of this hotel. He knew every guest by name, every anniversary, every allergy. And now Brad was snapping his fingers in Mr. Henderson's face. "I am telling you to move it, old man!" Brad shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I don't care if that is the standard uniform. It looks drab. It looks depressing. We are going to put you guys in something brighter, maybe some gold vests. Make it pop. And lose the glasses. You look like a librarian, not a hospitality professional." Mr. Henderson stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of polite restraint. "Mr. Pearson," he said calmly, "these uniforms were designed by a local atelier to reflect the architectural history of Chicago. As for my glasses, I require them to see." Brad laughed, turning to the camera with a theatrical roll of his eyes. "See? This is the problem with this place. No vision. Stuck in the past." He turned back to Mr. Henderson and poked him in the chest. "You know what? Don't worry about the uniform. You won't be needing it. I am bringing in my own team, younger guys. More energy. You are fired. Pack your things and get out." The breath caught in my throat. I wanted to march over there, grab Brad by his cheap lapels and throw him out onto the street. I wanted to scream that James Henderson was worth 10 of him. But I saw the red lights on the cameras. I saw the reporters scribbling in their notepads. They were waiting for it. They were waiting for Zuri King, the unstable, emotional, angry woman, to make a scene. If I yelled, if I defended my employee with passion, tomorrow's headline would be "CEO Meltdown in Lobby." It would prove my father's case for the conservatorship. I had to be an actress. I had to be the dutiful daughter. I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face that felt like cracked glass, and walked into the light. "Brad." I called out, my voice singing with fake delight. The cameras swiveled toward me. Flashbulbs erupted. I didn't blink. I walked straight to Brad, and before he could react, I pulled him into a stiff embrace. I could smell his cologne. It was overpowering and smelled of desperation. "I am so glad you made it," I said, pulling back but keeping my hand firmly on his arm, squeezing just hard enough to bruise. "I see you are already making an impression." Brad looked surprised by my warmth, but he quickly recovered, puffing out his chest for the cameras. "Zuri, finally. I was just doing some quality control. This place is a mess. The staff is lethargic. The decor is too dark. It feels like a funeral home in here. We need to brighten it up, make it more welcoming for a higher class of clientele." I knew exactly what he meant. Dark, higher class. It was the same coded language my father used. They wanted to whitewash my legacy. They wanted to turn my celebration of Black excellence into a generic, palatable playground for their country club friends. I nodded, swallowing the bile in my throat. "Interesting ideas, Brad. Radical." I turned to Mr. Henderson, who was looking at me with confusion and hurt. It broke my heart. I had to signal him. I had to let him know this was a play. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, "why don't you take a break? Go to the back office. Mr. Pearson and I need to discuss the transition. Please do not pack anything just yet. We will sort out the paperwork later." I stared at him hard, widening my eyes slightly. James Henderson was a smart man. He saw the tension in my jaw. He saw the cameras. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. "Very well, Ms. King. I will be in the office." As he walked away, Brad scoffed. "You are too soft, Zuri. That is why profits are stagnant. You treat these people like friends instead of employees. When I take over next week, that whole team is gone. I have a buddy from college, Ryan. He runs a nightclub in Miami. He knows how to bring in the real money. Bottle service in the lobby. That is the future. Bottle service. In a 5-star hotel lobby. He was going to turn my sanctuary into a frat house. I kept the smile plastered on my face. "We can discuss all of that at the gala tonight, Brad. Why don't we go upstairs? The cameras can't come up to the residential floors." "Security policy." Brad frowned, looking at the camera crew. Fine, but I want full access to the books. And I want the key to the executive suite. I gestured toward the elevators. After you, Mr. CEO. We walked to the elevator bank, the cameras following us until the brass doors slid shut, cutting off the noise, the lights, and the prying eyes. The moment we were alone in the rising metal box, the air changed. Brad loosened his tie and leaned against the mirrored wall, looking at me with a smirk. That wasn't so hard, was it? He said. You know, Zuri, if you play your cards right, I might let you keep a title. Something like Brand Ambassador. You can host parties. You are good at smiling and looking pretty. Leave the real business to the men. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the insecurity beneath the arrogance. I saw a man who had never earned a dollar he didn't marry into. You are right, Brad, I said softly. I have been working too hard. Maybe it is time I let go. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level. You go ahead to the conference room, I said. I need to freshen up before we review the accounts. Elena will get you coffee. Brad stepped out, adjusting his jacket. Make it a double espresso. And Zuri, don't take too long. We have a lot of paperwork to sign. He walked down the hall, strutting like he owned the building. I watched him go until he turned the corner. Then my face fell. The smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask of determination. I stepped back into the elevator and pressed the button for the garage, but then I stopped. No, I didn't need to go anywhere. I needed to end this. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The anger had crystallized into something useful. I dialed Dante. He answered on the first ring. Status, he asked. I stood alone in the elevator, watching the numbers on the display count down. Brad is here, I said. He just fired James Henderson. He is planning to gut the staff. He thinks he has already won. I heard the typing of a keyboard on the other end of the line. The wire transfer just cleared Zuri. The shell company Nemesis Holdings is officially the owner of the King Estate's debt. $82 million in principal and interest. We hold the mortgage on the mansion, the liens on the commercial properties, and the personal guarantees your father signed. And the clause I asked, the default clause. It is active, Dante said. Because they missed the last 3 payments to the original bank, you have the right to accelerate the debt. You can demand full payment immediately. If they can't pay, you can seize the assets without a court order. It is called a confession of judgment. Your father signed it 5 years ago to get a lower interest rate. He never thought the bank would sell the note to someone who hated him. I closed my eyes, letting the power of those words wash over me. Confession of judgment. It was the legal equivalent of a guillotine. Prepare the documents, I said. I want the foreclosure notice, the eviction order, and the seizure writ. Put them in a gift box. A nice one. With a ribbon. You are going to give it to him at the party? Dante asked. No, I said, opening my eyes as the elevator doors opened to the silence of the underground garage. I am going to give it to him on stage. When he asks me to sign the merger, I am going to hand him his execution. I hung up the phone. I walked to my car, not to leave, but to sit in the silence and wait. The invasion was over. The occupation had begun. But the resistance was about to burn the whole house down. Brad wanted a bottle service vibe. I was about to pop the cork on the most expensive bottle of champagne they had ever tasted. And it was going to taste like ash. Dante's private office was not located in the gleaming glass canyons of the Loop where I did my business. It was tucked away in a converted brownstone on the near north side, a building with no signage, heavy velvet curtains, and a security system that cost more than most family homes. This was where the elite of Chicago came when they needed problems to disappear, or in my case, when they needed to purchase the ammunition for a war. I walked in the smell of old paper and expensive scotch filling the air. Dante was sitting behind his mahogany desk, his sleeves rolled up, a mountain of documents spread out before him like a battle map. He did not smile when I entered. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had stared into an abyss and seen something ugly looking back. Sit down, Zuri, he said, his voice grave. You need to see this. I sat in the leather wingback chair, placing my clutch on the floor. Did you secure the debt? I asked, cutting straight to the chase. Dante took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. We can secure it. The bank is desperate to get these loans off their books. They are toxic assets. But before you sign the check, you need to understand exactly what your father has done. I thought I knew how bad it was. I was wrong. He pushed a stack of papers toward me. King Estates is not just broke, Zuri. It is a cadaver. Your father has been running a Ponzi scheme on his own life for the past decade. I picked up the first sheet. It was a balance sheet, but it was bleeding red ink. Explain it to me, I said. Dante stood up and walked to a whiteboard covered in diagrams. He started borrowing 10 years ago, right around the time your mother got sick. At first, it was to cover medical bills, or so he claimed. But the spending didn't stop when she died. It accelerated. He took out a second mortgage on the mansion, then a third. Then he started leveraging the commercial properties. Dante pointed to a line on the chart. He sold the downtown office building 5 years ago, but he leased it back immediately so he could keep his name on the door. He is paying triple the market rent just to maintain the illusion that he still owns it. And where is that money coming from? I looked at the documents. High-interest loans, shadow lenders. He is borrowing from sharks to pay the banks, I whispered. It gets worse, Dante said. He raided the employee pension fund. That is a federal crime, Zuri. If the IRS looks at these books, Marcus is not just going broke, he is going to prison for 20 years. I felt a cold detachment settle over me. I always knew my father was bad with money, but I never thought he was a criminal. He had risked the livelihoods of the people who had served our family for decades just to keep up his country club membership. But that is not why I called you here, Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. The debt is $80 million. To get that kind of credit, he needed collateral. He needed hard assets to pledge against the loans. He pledged the house, I said. I expected that. Yes, the house is gone. If you buy the debt, you own the house. But the house wasn't enough to cover his latest round of spending. Specifically, the loans he took out last year. Last year, I asked. What did he spend $10 million on last year? Dante slid a credit card statement across the desk. I looked at the charges. Cartier, Hermes, a destination wedding planner, a custom Porsche. Chloe. I said the name, tasting like ash in my mouth. He spent $10 million funding Chloe's lifestyle. He bought her a life she didn't earn. And to get that money, Dante continued, he had to put up the last asset he had. The only thing in the King portfolio that was completely paid off and unencumbered. Dante hesitated. He looked at me with genuine sorrow in his eyes. What did he pledge, Dante? I asked, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. The Savannah plot, Dante said softly. The room seemed to spin. I gripped the arms of the chair so hard my fingernails dug into the leather. The Savannah plot. It was a 20-acre estate in Georgia that had been in my mother's family for 4 generations. It was sacred land. It was where we spent our summers. It was where my grandmother taught me to pray. And it was where my mother was buried. He mortgaged the cemetery, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He mortgaged Mom's grave. Dante nodded slowly. He listed it as undeveloped commercial land. The lender has the right to repossess it, if Marcus defaults, which he effectively has. The developers plan to pave it over. They want to build a distribution center, Zuri. They will exhume the bodies. A sound escaped my throat that was half sob, half growl. The image of bulldozers tearing up the earth above my mother's casket flashed before my eyes. He did this. Marcus did this. He traded his wife's eternal rest for a sequined dress for Chloe. He sold our history so Brad could drive a luxury car. This was no longer business. This was no longer about a hotel chain or a reputation. This was a blood feud. Give me the pen, I said. Zuri, listen to me, Dante warned. If you buy this debt, you become the bank. You hold the axe, but you also inherit the mess. You will have to be the one to evict them. You will have to be the one to seize the land. It will be ugly. I stood up. I walked around the desk and snatched the pen from Dante's hand. My father tried to bury me in a mental institution to steal my money, but he forgot that he already buried the only person who ever loved him. He sold her out. I looked at the purchase agreement. The shell company Dante had set up was named Nemesis Holdings LLC, Nemesis, the goddess of divine retribution. It was perfect. I signed my name. The ink flowed dark and permanent. Transfer the funds, I commanded. $82 million. Wire it now. I want the title to the mansion, the rights to the king name, and the deed to the Savannah plot in my hand before I leave this office. Dante typed rapidly on his keyboard. Initiating transfer. We are buying the note from the shadow lender. They are happy to get out. They didn't want the publicity of evicting a socialite family. They are sending the digital keys. Now. A printer in the corner whirred to life. It began to spit out document after document. The foreclosure notice. The deed of trust. The default declaration. I walked over to the printer and watched the pages pile up. They were warm to the touch. I picked up the stack. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. You are officially the owner of King Estates, Dante said, leaning back in his chair. Technically, your father is now your tenant, and since he is 6 months behind on payments, he is a delinquent tenant. I flipped to the page concerning the Savannah plot. I saw my father's signature at the bottom, signing away my mother's resting place. I traced his signature with my thumb. Does he know I asked? Does he know the debt was sold? Not yet, Dante said. The lender is required to notify him within 48 hours. But right now, he thinks he is still dealing with a faceless bank in the Cayman Islands. He has no idea the wolf is already inside the house. I took the documents and placed them carefully into my briefcase. Tonight is the gala, I said. He wants me to sign a merger. He wants to stand on stage and announce that the King family is united. Dante looked at me. What are you going to do, Zuri? I walked to the door and paused, looking back at the whiteboard that detailed the destruction of my family's honor. I am going to give him exactly what he wants, I said. I am going to give him a night no one will ever forget. I stepped out into the cool Chicago afternoon. The wind was picking up, blowing off the lake. It felt cleansing. I had walked into Dante's office as a victim of blackmail. I was walking out as the executioner. I got into my car and placed the briefcase on the passenger seat. I rested my hand on it for a moment. Don't worry, Mom, I whispered to the empty car. I bought you back. And tonight, I am going to make sure the man who sold you pays for it with everything he has left. I started the engine. The dashboard clock read 4 p.m. The gala started at 7. I had 3 hours to prepare. 3 hours to transform from the dutiful daughter into the angel of death. I drove toward the salon. I needed my hair done. I needed my makeup flawless. And I needed to put on the white suit, the one that looked like marble, the one that looked like a tombstone. Because tonight I was going to a funeral. It just wasn't going to be mine. The air inside the Chanel boutique on Michigan Avenue was thinner than the air outside. It was scented with jasmine and the distinct metallic smell of limitless credit limits. I stood outside the glass doors for a moment, adjusting my sunglasses. I was not here to shop. I was here to hunt. Through the display window I could see her, Chloe. She was standing by the counter surrounded by a mountain of black and white shopping bags. She was laughing at something the sales assistant said, twirling a diamond necklace around her finger. I checked my phone one last time. Dante had confirmed that the listening device was active. It was a tiny black disc, no larger than a button, tucked into the palm of my gloved hand. I took a deep breath. This performance had to be flawless. I had to be the broken sister. The defeated CEO. The woman who had lost everything. If Chloe sensed even a hint of my strength, she would put her guard up. I needed her arrogant. I needed her careless. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped onto the plush carpet. Chloe. I called out, my voice trembling just enough to sound hesitant. My sister spun around. When she saw me, her smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure annoyance. She looked me up and down, taking in my lack of jewelry and my slightly slumped shoulders. Zuri, what are you doing here following me? Or did you just come to stare at things you can no longer afford? She turned back to the sales assistant, a young woman who looked terrified of the tension radiating between us. Ring this up too, Chloe said, tossing a $5,000 handbag onto the counter. And charge it to the King Estates corporate account. My father is celebrating a merger today. I felt a sharp spike of anger. She was charging it to King Estates, which meant she was charging it to me. She was spending my money to buy accessories for my funeral. But I swallowed the rage. I let my shoulders drop further. I walked over to her and stopped at a respectful distance. I am not following you, Chloe. I saw your car outside. I wanted to talk, before tonight. Chloe raised an eyebrow. She picked up a silk scarf and draped it over her arm, inspecting herself in the mirror. Talk about what? Unless you are coming to apologize for being a hysterical mess. I do not have time. I have a gala to prepare for. I am the host after all, since you will likely be indisposed. I looked at the floor. I am tired, Chloe, I said softly. She stopped moving. She looked at me in the mirror, her eyes narrowing. What did you say? I said I am tired. I looked up, meeting her gaze with eyes that I forced to look watery. I can't fight anymore. The news, the stock drop, the lawyers. It is too much. You and Dad. You win. The silence in the boutique was absolute. Even the sales assistant stopped typing. Chloe turned around slowly, facing me fully. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. It was the look of a cat that had just cornered a mouse. Say it again, she whispered. I took a shaky breath. You win. I am going to sign the papers tonight. I just want it to be over. I want the press to leave me alone. I want Dad to stop threatening me. Chloe let out a laugh that sounded like champagne bubbles popping. She clapped her hands together in delight. Oh, Zuri. Finally, I knew you would come to your senses. I told Brad you would break. He owes me $50. She walked over to me and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. You are doing the right thing, sis. You were never built for the pressure. Some of us are queens and some of us are, well, subjects. It is better that you accept your place. She turned back to the counter, snapping her fingers at the assistant. Did you hear that? Wrap everything up? We are celebrating. The assistant hurried to box up the items. Chloe leaned against the counter, looking at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. Since you are being so sensible, Zuri, maybe I will let you sit at the head table tonight. Way at the end, of course. But you can be in the photos. It will look good for the brand. Thank you, Chloe, I mumbled. That is generous of you. The assistant began placing the boxes into large, glossy shopping bags. There were 6 of them. Huge, heavy bags filled with clothes and accessories that cost more than most people's tuition. Chloe looked at the bags, then she looked at me. Her eyes lit up with a new malicious idea. You know my driver is waiting around the block. The traffic is terrible, and I really do not want to break a nail carrying all this to the car. She pointed a manicured finger at the bags. Grab those for me, will you? Consider it practice. If you are going to be living in the guest house, you will need to start pulling your weight around the estate. I stared at the bags. She wanted the CEO of Onyx Hotels to carry her shopping like a servant. It was the ultimate test of submission. If I refused, she would know I was faking. If I did it, she would own me. I walked to the counter. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I kept my head down. Of course, Chloe. Let me help. I reached for the bags. They were heavy. The handles dug into my palms. Careful, Chloe snapped. That is cashmere. Don't drag it on the floor. I lifted the bags, struggling slightly under the weight. Chloe watched me, a smirk playing on her lips. She picked up her small clutch and checked her reflection one last time. Come on then, chop chop. She turned and marched toward the door, expecting me to follow. I waited until her back was turned. I waited until she was pushing the door open, distracted by her own reflection in the glass. I shifted the bags in my left hand, freeing my right. I held the bag that contained the Birkin she had just bought. It was the one she would keep closest to her, the one she would take into the dressing room, the one she would place on the table next to her father. With a sleight of hand I had practiced a dozen times that morning, I slipped the tiny black disc inside the bag. I slid it deep between the layers of tissue paper. It was done. I hurried after her, stepping out onto the busy street. The wind whipped my hair across my face. Chloe was standing at the curb, waving impatiently for her driver. Hurry up, Zuri. God, you are slow. No wonder your company is failing. I walked up to her and placed the bags in the trunk of the waiting limousine. The driver tried to help me, but Chloe stopped him. No, let her do it. She needs to feel useful. I loaded the last bag, the one with the bug. I closed the trunk with a solid thud. Chloe climbed into the back seat of the limo. She rolled down the window and looked at me standing on the curb. Don't be late tonight, Zuri, and try to wear something appropriate. We don't want you looking like a beggar at my party. I forced one last weak smile. I will be there, Chloe. I promise. The window rolled up. The limo pulled away, merging into the Chicago traffic. I stood there for a moment, watching the car disappear. The submissive posture evaporated from my body instantly. I straightened my spine. I took off my sunglasses and wiped the fake tears from my eyes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and opened the app connected to the listening device. A green waveform appeared on the screen. Audio, clear, the app read. I put my headphones in. Through the static, I heard the rustle of leather seats. Then I heard Chloe's voice, crystal clear. Daddy, it is me. Guess who I just ran into? Zuri. She is totally broken. She was crying in the middle of the store. Yes, she is going to sign. She is terrified. I heard my father's voice on the other end, booming through the car's Bluetooth speaker, which the bug picked up perfectly. Good. But we stick to the plan. Even after she signs, we file the mental health petition. I want her locked up, Chloe. I do not want her waking up in 6 months and trying to sue us. We need to make sure she is sedated and silenced. Permanently. I pressed the record button. Got you. I turned and walked down Michigan Avenue. I didn't look like a defeated woman anymore. I looked like a woman who had just planted a bomb and was walking away before the explosion. I hailed a taxi. To the Onyx Tower, I told the driver. I had one stop left to make. I had the debt. I had the recording. Now I needed the visual. I needed to pick up the white suit. The suit I would wear to end the King dynasty. Tonight, Chloe wanted me to carry her bags. Tonight, she would be carrying the weight of a felony fraud charge. And unlike the shopping bags, she wouldn't be able to put that down. The silence of my penthouse was usually a comfort, but today it felt like the quiet inside a submarine before a torpedo launch. I sat at my dining table, the glass surface cool against my forearms. In front of me was my laptop, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, and a hard drive that contained the financial ruin of the King family. But money was only half the battle. To win the war, I needed to prove intent. I needed a judge to hear in their own words that the conservatorship was not about my mental health, but about their greed. I put the headphones on. The world outside vanished, replaced by a low, static hiss. On the screen, the audio software showed a flat green line. The bug was active, transmitting from the bottom of the orange Hermes bag I had loaded into Chloe's trunk an hour ago. The line spiked, a car door slammed, then the sound of heels clicking on stone. They were back at the mansion. I turned up the volume, closing my eyes to visualize the scene. I knew the acoustics of that house better than I knew my own heartbeat. The echo meant they were in the foyer. The muffled thud meant the heavy mahogany doors of the library had just been closed. That was my father's sanctuary. That was where the deals were made. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady. The green line on the screen began to dance as voices filled my ears. God, these bags are heavy, Chloe whined. The sound was crisp, as if she were standing right next to me. I hoped Zuri didn't wrinkle the silk. I would hate to have to fire her from her laundry duties before she even starts. I heard the clink of glass against crystal. My father was pouring a drink. It was not even 5 in the afternoon. Forget the bags, Chloe Marcus said. His voice was deep gravelly and stripped of the fake warmth he used in public. Did she suspect anything? Did she ask about the terms of the merger? No, Chloe replied. The sound of rustling fabric followed. She was probably kicking off her shoes. She bought it hook, line, and sinker. She was crying, Dad. Actually crying in the middle of Chanel. She is terrified of the press. She thinks signing the papers will make the bad headlines go away. I watched the waveform on my screen. It was mesmerizing to hear them discuss my destruction so casually, like they were planning a dinner menu. Good, Marcus grunted. We need her compliant for the stage tonight. The press will be there. The cameras need to see a united front. She signs the transfer of assets, we smile, we cut the cake. And then Chloe asked. There was a pause. I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment of truth. And then Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, sinister register, we proceed with the plan. Dr. Evans is already preparing the admission paperwork for St. Jude's Behavioral Health Center. St. Jude's. The name sent a chill through my veins. It was a high-security psychiatric facility 2 hours outside the city. It was a place where people were sent to be forgotten. But Dad, Chloe said, her voice sounding a little hesitant, though not out of morality but out of practicality. If she signs the papers, do we really need to lock her up? I mean, we get the company. Isn't that enough? Marcus laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. You are naive, Chloe. If we leave her free, she will wake up. In a month or 6 months, the shock will wear off. She will hire lawyers. She will sue us for duress. She will try to claw it all back. Zuri is smart. We cannot leave her on the board. We cannot leave her in the city. I heard the sound of liquid being swallowed. We need to break her credibility permanently, Marcus continued. A stay at St. Jude's establishes a legal precedent. Once she is in the system as a mental patient, her signature on any legal document becomes contestable forever. She becomes a ghost, Chloe, and we become the sole guardians of the King legacy. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. He didn't just want to steal from me. He wanted to erase me. He wanted to strip me of my agency, my voice, and my freedom. He was willing to gaslight the legal system to put his own daughter in a padded room just to cover his debts. I moved my mouse and clicked the Save Clip button. I named the file Exhibit A, Malice Aforethought. But the conversation wasn't over. The door to the library opened. Heavier footsteps entered the room. Brad. Hey, family. Brad's voice boomed, distorted slightly by the microphone's proximity to the leather bag. I just got off the phone with the crypto guys. They are stoked. Crypto guys, Marcus asked, sounding irritated. Brad, we discussed this. We are focusing on the real estate assets. Brad laughed, the sound of ice rattling in a glass. Old school thinking, Marcus. That is why you guys are in debt. Look, once Zuri signs over Onyx, we are sitting on 600 million in tangible assets. But the hotel business. It is boring. Margins are thin. Staff is annoying. I was thinking we liquidate. Liquidate? Chloe asked. Yeah, Brad said, his voice rising with excitement. We sell the properties. The downtown tower alone is worth 200 million. We dump the hotels, take the cash, and dump it into Bitcoin and those monkey NFTs. I have a buddy who says we could triple the money in 6 months. No staff, no overhead, just pure profit. I felt a wave of nausea. Onyx Hotels was not just a business. It was a community. I employed 4,000 people. Housekeepers, concierges, chefs, valets. Families relied on me for their health care, their mortgages, their children's tuition. Brad wanted to fire them all, sell the buildings for parts, and gamble the money on internet coins. He was going to burn my empire to the ground to play casino. Marcus sighed. He didn't sound horrified by the destruction of my work. He just sounded bored. We can discuss the liquidation strategy later, Brad. First, we need the signature. Is the car ready? Yeah, limo is out front, Brad said. By the way, I saw Zuri's car on the highway earlier. She was driving like a grandma. I bet she is at home right now crying into her pillow. Chloe giggled. Let her cry. She won't have much time for tears where she is going. I heard St. Jude's doesn't allow personal items. No silk suits for Zuri. Just hospital gowns and plastic slippers. They all laughed. A collective harmonious laugh of three people who believed they were untouchable. I stopped the recording. I took off the headphones and set them gently on the table. The silence of the penthouse returned, but it no longer felt empty. It felt charged. It felt like the air before a lightning strike. I had it all. I had the financial documents proving Marcus was bankrupt. I had the deed to the house proving I was his landlord. And now, I had the audio recording proving a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud and false imprisonment. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The sun was beginning to set over Chicago, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Somewhere out there in that dying light, my family was putting on their tuxedos and gowns. They were spritzing perfume and adjusting ties, thinking they were preparing for a coronation. They had no idea they were dressing for an autopsy. I turned away from the window and walked into my dressing room. Hanging on the mannequin in the center of the room was the suit. It was a custom piece from Milan, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. It was white, stark, blinding, clinical white. It was not a color of surrender. It was the color of a blank slate. I began to dress. The silk trousers slid on cool against my skin. The blazer buttoned with a satisfying snap. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see the scared girl from the funeral photos. I didn't see the tired woman from the boutique. I saw the CEO. I saw the owner. I saw the end of the line. I slicked my hair back into a tight, severe bun. No loose strands. No chaos. Just control. I applied my makeup with the precision of a war paint. Sharp eyeliner. Dark, blood-red lips. I picked up the briefcase containing the documents. I picked up the USB drive containing the audio file. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. Do not be late, and remember, smile. I looked at the message and typed a reply. I am on my way, and do not worry, I will be smiling. I walked to the private elevator that opened directly into my foyer. As the doors closed, sealing me in, I checked my reflection in the polished steel. It is time to go to work, I whispered. The elevator descended, carrying me down to the street where my driver was waiting. The engine purred. The city awaited. And at the King Estates Gala, the champagne was on ice. Little did they know I was bringing the fire. The sun had set over Chicago, leaving the skyline to glitter like a necklace of jagged diamonds against the black throat of the night. In my dressing room, the only light came from the vanity mirror, casting long, sharp shadows against the walls. On the floor lay the dress Chloe had suggested I wear. It was a pale pink chiffon thing, delicate and flimsy. It was a dress for a victim. It was a dress for a woman who was about to be led to the slaughter. I stepped over it and walked to the garment bag hanging on the door. I unzipped it slowly. The sound of the zipper was the only noise in the room, loud and decisive. Inside was not a dress. It was a suit, but not just any suit. It was a custom-tailored ensemble in blinding stark white. The fabric was heavy Italian silk that draped like liquid marble. The lapels were sharp enough to cut glass. I slipped into the trousers. They fit perfectly high-waisted and commanding. I buttoned the blazer. It cinched at my waist, creating a silhouette that was both feminine and terrifying. I looked in the mirror. White was traditionally the color of surrender, but tonight it was the color of a blank slate. It was the color of the ice that was about to bury the King dynasty. I sat down at the vanity. I did not apply the soft, natural makeup my father preferred. I contoured my cheekbones until they looked like blades. I applied a dark, blood-red lipstick that looked like a fresh wound. I pulled my hair back into a severe tight bun, securing it with pins that felt like little daggers against my scalp. No loose strands, no chaos, just absolute terrifying control. My phone buzzed on the marble counter. It was Dante. The team is in position. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my jacket. I picked up my clutch. Inside, I didn't carry lipstick or tissues. I carried a USB drive and a single folded piece of paper, the eviction notice. I walked out of the bedroom and into the main living area of the penthouse. Dante was waiting for me by the fireplace. Standing next to him was Marcus Stone, the head of my private security detail. Stone was a former Navy SEAL, a man who spoke little and saw everything. When I walked in, they both stopped talking. Dante looked me up and down, his eyes widening slightly. "You look like you are going to a funeral," Zuri, Dante said softly. "I am," I replied, my voice steady. "But I am not the one in the casket." I turned to Stone. "Run me through the perimeter one last time." Stone nodded, pulling up a digital schematic of the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton on his tablet. "We have 6 men stationed at the main exits, 2 backstage, 2 in the audio-visual booth. Once you give the signal, we lock the side doors. The only way out will be through the main lobby past the press line. And the Wi-Fi," I asked. "We have a dedicated hotspot for your presentation," Stone confirmed. "We have also jammed the venue's public signal to prevent anyone from live streaming the first 5 minutes. We want to control the narrative until the reveal." "Good," I said. "And the guest list?" Stone tapped the screen. 500 attendees. The mayor is there, 3 senators, and the entire board of directors of Onyx Hotels. Your father made sure to invite every person who matters." I smiled. It was a cold, humorless expression. He wanted witnesses for my humiliation. He is going to get witnesses for his execution. I turned to Dante. "Do you have the package for Detective Vance?" Dante reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. "The forensic accounting report, the wire transfer records from the shadow lenders, and the audio recording of the conspiracy to commit fraud. It is all there." I took the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt like justice. "Let's go," I said. We took the private elevator down to the garage. Waiting in the shadows was not my usual town car, but a black armored SUV. Leaning against it was Detective Vance of the Economic Crimes Unit. He was a weary-looking man in a rumpled raincoat holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. He had been chasing my father's shell companies for years, but never had enough to make a charge stick. Until tonight. Ms. King, Vance said, straightening up as I approached. "You look prepared." I handed him the envelope. "This is everything, Detective. The tax evasion, the pension fund embezzlement, and the proof that he is currently trying to defraud a healthcare facility to imprison a whistleblower." Vance took the envelope, weighing it in his hand. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. "You know, once I open this, there is no going back, right? This is your father. This is a felony indictment. He will die in prison." I looked Vance in the eye. "My father died a long time ago, Detective. The man in that ballroom is just a thief who stole his name." Vance nodded slowly. He respected the coldness. He understood the cost. "We will have units on standby 2 blocks away. When you give the signal, we move in." "Don't move in too early," I instructed. "I want him to finish his speech. I want him to think he has won. I want the fall to be absolute." "Understood," Vance said. "Good luck in there." I climbed into the back of the SUV. Dante slid in beside me. Stone took the front passenger seat. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing us in a capsule of safety. The drive to the Ritz-Carlton was short. The city blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of neon and rain. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't rehearse my lines. I sat in silence, breathing deeply, slowing my heart rate. I visualized the ballroom. I visualized the chandelier. I visualized my father's face. Most people think revenge is a crime of passion. They think it is screaming and throwing things. They are wrong. True revenge is quiet. It is administrative. It is signing a piece of paper that turns a king into a pauper. The SUV slowed down. We were approaching the rear entrance of the hotel. I could see the glow of the paparazzi flashbulbs out front, hungry for the arrival of the socialites. I would not give them the satisfaction of an entrance. I was not a guest. I was the event. Stone turned around in his seat. "We are here, Ms. King. The audio team is ready for your override code." I nodded. Dante reached over and squeezed my hand. His palm was warm, grounding. "Are you sure about this, Zuri? Once you walk onto that stage, you destroy the family name. You will be the woman who sent her father to jail. The world might hate you for it." I looked down at my white suit. It glowed in the dim light of the car. "Let them hate me," I said. "As long as they respect me." I opened the door and stepped out onto the wet pavement. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. I straightened my jacket. I lifted my chin. I walked toward the service entrance, my heels clicking a rhythm of war on the concrete. Inside, the music was already playing. I could hear the muffled sound of applause. They were celebrating the past. I was here to dictate the future. I walked past the kitchen staff, who stopped and stared at the woman in white marching toward the stage like a soldier. I reached the heavy velvet curtains of the backstage area. Through the gap, I could see him, Marcus King, my father. He was standing at the podium holding a glass of champagne, basking in the adoration of the crowd. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. He was laughing at a joke Brad had just whispered in his ear. I stood in the shadows watching him. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was the peace of a sniper who has finally aligned the crosshairs. "And enjoy the champagne, Marcus," I whispered into the darkness. "It is the last thing you will ever taste as a free man." I checked my watch. It was time. Tonight, the king dies. I pushed past the curtain and stepped into the light. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal designed to make people feel small. 500 of Chicago's elite were packed inside, sipping champagne that cost more than my first car. The air smelled of white lilies and ambition. I stood at the back of the room, concealed by the heavy velvet drapes of the service entrance, watching the spectacle. It was a masterclass in deception. My father had spared no expense. There were ice sculptures in the shape of the King Estate's logo. There was a 10-piece orchestra playing soft, unobjectionable jazz. And everywhere I looked, I saw the faces of people who had ignored me for years, now smiling, as if they were witnessing a royal coronation. I adjusted the cuffs of my white suit. Stone, my head of security, stood silently behind me. He tapped his earpiece once, a signal that the perimeter was secure. The doors were manned. The trap was set. I stepped out from behind the curtain. The reaction was not immediate. It started as a ripple. A waiter dropped a tray. A woman in the back row gasped. Then the whispers began. They moved through the crowd like a wave, turning heads until 500 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I did not walk like a guest. I walked like an invasion. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide aisle down the center of the room. I kept my chin high, my face a mask of bored indifference. I could hear the snippets of conversation as I passed. "Is that her? I thought she was in a hospital. Look at that suit. It is mesmerizing. She looks dangerous." They were right. I was dangerous. I stopped near the front, just outside the ring of bright lights that bathed the stage. On the stage, a massive screen was playing a slideshow. I looked up and felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. It was a montage of family photos. There was my father looking regal. There was Chloe looking adorable. And there was me. But the photos were lies. There was a picture of the family skiing in Aspen 3 years ago. I remembered that trip. I wasn't invited. I spent that Christmas alone in my apartment eating takeout. But on the screen there, I was digitally inserted into the frame, smiling next to a father who hadn't called me in months. The next slide showed my college graduation. In reality, my father had left early to take a business call. In the photo on the screen, he was hugging me, looking like the proudest dad in the world. He was rewriting history. He was manufacturing a memory of love to cover a lifetime of neglect. It was sick, it was brilliant, and it was about to end. The music swelled to a crescendo. The lights dimmed, leaving only a single spotlight on the center of the stage. My father walked out. Marcus King looked every inch the patriarch. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His hair was silver and perfectly coiffed. He raised his hands, silencing the applause with a humble bow that he had practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm and rich, filling the room. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate 40 years of King Estates." He paused, looking out over the crowd with misty eyes. "When I started this company, I had nothing but a dream and a shovel. I built this legacy brick by brick, not for money, not for fame, but for family. Because at the end of the day, buildings crumble, markets crash. But family is the foundation that never cracks." A murmur of agreement went through the crowd. I saw the mayor nodding solemnly in the front row. They were eating it up. He was selling them a fantasy, and they were buying it wholesale. "We have had our challenges," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a confessional whisper. "Every family does. There were times when the weight of this legacy was too heavy. Times when my beloved daughter Zuri struggled to find her footing." He looked directly at me. The spotlight swung around, blinding me for a second. I didn't blink. I stared right back at him, my expression unreadable. "But tonight," Marcus declared, his voice rising triumphantly, "we are putting the past behind us. Tonight the prodigal daughter returns. Tonight we merge the innovation of Onyx Hotels with the tradition of King Estates. We become one, stronger, united, unbreakable." The crowd erupted in applause. It was deafening. It was the sound of 500 people cheering for my surrender. Marcus extended a hand toward me. "Zuri, my darling, come up here. Come take your rightful place." This was it, the walk of shame. Or so they thought. I began to move. My heels sank slightly into the plush red carpet. I ascended the stairs to the stage. The heat from the stage lights was intense. It felt like walking into a furnace. As I reached the podium, the applause began to fade, replaced by a tense, expectant silence. I stood next to my father. Up close, I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. I could smell the scotch on his breath, masked by mints. He put his arm around my shoulder. His grip was tight, painful. To the audience, it looked like a hug. To me, it felt like a shackle. "Smile," he hissed through his teeth while waving to the crowd. "You look like a corpse." I didn't smile. I looked at the table set up on the side of the stage. Sitting there were Chloe and Brad. Chloe was beaming, looking victorious in her sequined gown. Brad was sitting with a pen in his hand, bouncing his leg nervously. I walked over to the table. The contract was laid out in the center. It was thick, bound in leather. The page was turned to the signature line. "Zuri King, transferor." Brad stood up and pulled out a chair for me. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. His eyes were wide and manic. "Do not try anything stupid, Zuri," he whispered, his voice low and venomous. "We have Dr. Evans standing by in the wings with a sedative. You sign this paper or you leave here in a straitjacket." I looked at him. I saw the greed in his eyes. I saw the weakness. "Is that a threat?" "Brad?" I asked, loud enough for Chloe to hear, but too quiet for the microphone. "It is a promise," he sneered. "Now sit down and sign. I have crypto to buy." I sat down. The chair was cold. I looked at the contract. The letters seemed to swim before my eyes. Transfer of all assets. Relinquishment of voting rights. Appointment of Bradley Pearson as trustee. It was a death warrant for my life's work. Chloe leaned over from her seat. She placed a manicured hand on my arm. "Just do it, Zuri," she whispered. "Be a good sister for once. Daddy needs this. We need this. Think of it as paying us back for raising you." Paying them back. The irony almost made me laugh. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen, the kind used to sign treaties. I held it over the paper. My father walked over to the microphone. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming. "Witness the moment the King dynasty secures its future for the next 100 years." He looked down at me, his eyes commanding. "Sign it, Zuri." I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the crowd. I saw the faces of the board members who had betrayed me. I saw the reporters with their cameras raised waiting to capture my defeat. I saw the waitstaff in the shadows looking at me with worry. And then I looked at the screen behind me. The fake photo of the happy family in Aspen was still displayed. It was so perfect, so fraudulent. I felt a calm settle over me. It was the calm of the hurricane's eye. I put the pen down. The sound of the metal hitting the wood was small, but in the silence of the room it sounded like a gunshot. Brad froze. Chloe's smile faltered. My father's eye twitched. Zuri Marcus said, his voice straining to maintain the jovial tone. "The pen is right there." I stood up. "I am not signing this," I said. I didn't whisper it. I didn't shout it. I said it with the clear projecting voice of a CEO addressing a shareholder meeting. The crowd gasped. My father stepped away from the podium and grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to leave a bruise. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, his face turning red. "Sit down. Sign the paper." "No," I said. I pulled my arm free from his grip. I walked past him. I walked past Brad, who was staring at me with his mouth open. I walked straight to the podium. My father tried to block me. "Security," he shouted. "Get her off the stage. She is having an episode." But the security guards didn't move. They were my men. Stone had replaced the hotel security an hour ago. My father looked around confused, panic starting to set in. I gripped the sides of the podium. The wood was cool under my palms. I looked out at the 500 faces. I saw confusion. I saw shock. And I saw anticipation. They knew something was wrong. They knew the script had been flipped. I leaned into the microphone. "My father is right about one thing," I said, my voice echoing through the massive hall. "Family is a foundation. But what he didn't tell you is that some foundations are built on sand, and some are built on lies." "Zuri, stop!" Marcus screamed, lunging toward me. Stone stepped out from the shadows. He didn't touch my father. He just stood between us, a wall of muscle and stone. Marcus stopped, terrified. I continued, my eyes locking on the camera lens of the main news feed. "He told you I was sick. He told you I was unstable. He told you I needed to be saved, but the only thing sick about this family is the balance sheet." I reached into my blazer pocket. I didn't pull out a tissue. I didn't pull out a speech. I pulled out a USB drive. I plugged it into the podium's media console. "Cut the feed," Brad screamed, running toward the sound booth. "Cut the damn feed." But it was too late. My team in the booth had locked the system. I looked back at the screen. The fake photo of Aspen flickered and died. The screen went black for a second. And then it turned red. Bright, alarming blood red. And in the center of the screen, in bold white letters, a new document appeared. It wasn't a family photo. It was a bank statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm, "welcome to the real King Estates." The red light from the massive LED screen bathed the stage in a sinister crimson glow. The gasps from the audience were not polite ripples of surprise anymore. They were sharp intakes of breath, the sound of 500 wealthy people realizing they were witnessing a public execution. I stood at the podium, my white suit reflecting the red light, making me look like I was standing in the center of a fire. Behind me, the words, "Notice of default and immediate asset seizure," loomed 20 feet tall. My father stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the water. He blinked rapidly, trying to make the words change, trying to will the happy family photos back into existence. But the bank statement remained unyielding and brutal. "What is this?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "This is a mistake. Get this off the screen." He turned to the audio booth, waving his arms frantically. "Cut it," I said, "cut it." But the screen did not flicker. My team had total control. I tapped the microphone with my index finger. The sound boomed through the ballroom, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "It is not a mistake, Marcus," I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the room. "It is an accounting." I picked up the remote clicker from the podium. I pressed the button. The screen changed. It was no longer just a title page. It was a list. A long, scrolling list of loans, dates, and amounts. Loan number 402, secured against the King Estates Commercial Tower. Defaulted. Loan number 591, secured against the family mansion in Highland Park. Defaulted. Personal line of credit secured against the King Family Trust. Defaulted. I read the list like I was reading a grocery list. The mundanity of my tone made the reality of the debt even more terrifying. Total outstanding principal and interest $82,400,000. The number hung in the air. I heard a glass shatter somewhere in the audience. Someone had dropped their champagne. Marcus lunged toward me. He forgot the crowd. He forgot the cameras. He only saw the daughter who was burning his world down. "You lie!" he screamed, his face turning a mottled purple. "You lying, ungrateful wretch! I have a deal with the bank. I have an extension." Stone stepped forward again, his hand resting heavily on my father's chest, holding him back with effortless strength. Marcus flailed against him, looking small and pathetic. I looked at my father, tilting my head slightly to the side. "You are right, Marcus. You did have a deal with First National. They gave you a 6-month extension." Marcus stopped struggling. He looked at me with wild hope. "Yes, exactly," he shouted, turning to the crowd, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You see, she is crazy. She does not know what she is talking about. The bank gave me time. This is all void." He laughed, a desperate, hysterical sound. "She is trying to humiliate me, but she failed. The bank stands with me." I waited for him to finish. I waited for the echo of his laughter to die out. "The bank did stand with you, Marcus," I said softly. "Until 9 o'clock this morning." I took a step closer to him. "At 9:01 a.m., First National sold your entire debt portfolio. They were tired of your missed payments. They were tired of your excuses. So they sold the note to a private equity firm that offered to pay cash on the barrelhead." Marcus froze. The color drained from his face. "Who?" he whispered. "Who bought it?" I smiled. It was the smile I had practiced in the mirror. "A company called Nemesis Holdings." I gestured to myself. "And I am the sole proprietor of Nemesis." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. "I own your debt, Marcus. I am the bank now. And unlike First National, I do not grant extensions." Marcus staggered back as if I had physically struck him. He grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. You bought it, every cent," I confirmed. "And under the terms of the loan agreement you signed 5 years ago, specifically the acceleration clause on page 42. The new note holder has the right to demand full repayment immediately upon transfer if the borrower is in default." I looked at the crowd, then back at him. "I am demanding payment, Marcus. $82 million. Can you write the check tonight?" Marcus looked around the room, searching for an ally. He looked at the mayor. He looked at his golf buddies, but they were all looking down at their shoes or checking their phones. No one wanted to be associated with a corpse. Brad jumped up from the table. He knocked over his chair in his haste. "This is illegal!" he shouted, his voice high and pitchy. "You can't just call in a loan like that. We have rights. We have assets." He pointed at the screen. "We have the hotel chain. We have the brand." I turned my gaze to Brad. He looked like a child trying to play a man's game. "You have nothing, Brad." I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a new document. It was a foreclosure notice. "Since you cannot pay the $82 million, I am exercising my right to seize the collateral." I pointed to the items listed on the screen. The commercial tower downtown mine, the Highland Park mansion mine, the fleet of vintage cars in the garage mine, even the trademark on the name King Estates. It all belongs to Nemesis Holdings as of this moment. Chloe stood up slowly. She looked pale, her hands trembling by her sides. The house, she whispered. You are taking the house. I looked at my sister. The sister who had made me carry her shopping bags. The sister who had laughed about putting me in a mental ward. It is not your house, Chloe. It never was. It was the bank's house. And now it is my house. But where will we live? She asked, her voice sounding like a little girl's. I checked my watch. Well, the eviction notice I filed with the sheriff gives you 24 hours to vacate the premises. After that, anything left inside will be thrown onto the street. I suggest you start packing. I hear the guest house behind the garage is vacant. Oh, wait, no. I own that too. Brad rushed at me. He was fueled by panic and stupidity. You bitch, he screamed. You can't do this. I was supposed to be CEO. He raised his hand to strike me. Before he could get within 3 feet, Stone moved. It was a blur of motion. One moment Brad was charging, the next, he was face down on the stage. Stone's knee pressed firmly into his back, his arm twisted at a painful angle. Brad screamed in pain. The crowd gasped again. Flashbulbs erupted like a strobe light. I didn't flinch. I stood over Brad, looking down at him with cold disdain. You are fired, Brad, I said. And since you just attempted to assault the owner of the property, you are also banned from the premises. I looked up at Marcus. He was slumped in his chair, clutching his chest. He wasn't faking a heart attack this time. He was having a panic attack. His empire, his image, his entire identity had evaporated in 5 minutes. You can't do this to family, he wheezed. Zuri, please. Everyone is watching. I walked over to the podium and leaned into the mic one last time. Everyone is watching, Marcus. That is the point. You wanted a show. You wanted to show the world how powerful the King family is. I swept my arm across the stage, gesturing to the wreckage of their egos. Well, here it is. This is what happens when you build a kingdom on theft and lies. The true owner eventually comes home. I turned to the audience. The gala is over. Thank you for coming. Please feel free to finish the champagne. I paid for it. I walked toward the stairs. I didn't look back. I could hear Brad sobbing on the floor. I could hear Chloe asking her father to fix it. I could hear Marcus murmuring my name like a curse. But I wasn't done. I had taken their money. I had taken their home. But I still had the recording. I still had the police waiting outside. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, Detective Vance stepped out from the shadows. He looked at me and nodded. Is it time? He asked. I adjusted my jacket. It is time, Detective. Proceed. I stepped aside as a team of uniformed officers marched into the ballroom. The gasps turned into screams as the police ascended the stage. I watched as they pulled Marcus up from his chair. I watched as they cuffed his hands behind his back. I watched as they read him his rights in front of the people he had tried to impress for 40 years. Marcus King, you are under arrest for tax evasion, fraud, and embezzlement. Marcus looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with betrayal. Zuri, talking to them. I am your father. I looked at him, my expression blank. No, Marcus, you are just a tenant who didn't pay his rent. I turned and walked toward the exit, the white suit glowing in the chaos, leaving the ruins of my family behind me. The payoff was sweet. But the justice. That was just beginning. The financial ruin of the King family was displayed on the massive LED screen in 40-foot-high red letters. The asset seizure notice was burning into the retinas of every socialite in the room. But my father, Marcus King, was a cockroach. He was a survivor. Even as he stood in the wreckage of his fortune, I could see his mind working frantically, searching for a way to spin this. He straightened his tuxedo jacket, wiped the sweat from his brow, and turned to the shell-shocked audience with a look of practiced indignation. This is a misunderstanding, Marcus bellowed, his voice regaining some of its old theater projection. My daughter is confused. She is lashing out because of her mental state. This is exactly why we filed the petition. She is buying debt with company funds to sabotage her own family. It is a symptom of her illness. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is unwell. Look at her. She is hallucinating enemies where there is only love. A few people in the crowd murmured. The seed of doubt was always easy to plant when the accuser was a woman standing alone. Marcus saw the opening and lunged for it. We love you, Zuri, he pleaded, his voice dripping with fake concern. We just want to get you help. We want to take you to a place where you can rest. I stood at the podium, my hand resting on the media console. He was still trying to use the insanity defense. He was digging his own grave with a shovel made of lies. You want to take me to a place where I can rest? I asked into the microphone, my voice cutting through his performance like a scalpel. You mean St. Jude's Behavioral Health Center? Marcus froze. The name of the facility hung in the air. I don't know what you are talking about, he stammered. I pressed a button on the console. The red screen behind me flickered. The text vanished, replaced by a simple audio waveform, a jagged green line on a black background. Let us hear how much you love me, Marcus, I said. I hit play. The sound was crystal clear. It boomed through the high-end speakers of the Ritz-Carlton, reaching every corner of the room. It was the recording from the library captured just hours ago. We proceed with the plan. Marcus's voice echoed distinct and undeniable. Dr. Evans is already preparing the admission paperwork for St. Jude's. The crowd gasped. Marcus looked around, his eyes wide with terror. He clawed at his throat as if trying to catch the words back. But Dad Chloe's voice chirped through the speakers. If she signs the papers, do we really need to lock her up? If we leave her free, she will wake up. Marcus's recorded voice replied, cold and calculating. We need to break her credibility permanently. She becomes a ghost, Chloe. Then came the laughter. The cruel collective laughter of my father, my sister, and Brad. She won't have much time for tears where she is going. Brad's voice sneered. St. Jude's doesn't allow personal items. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of judgment. Every person in that room, the politicians, the investors, the press, they all looked at Marcus King. And for the first time, they didn't see a patriarch. They saw a monster. That was recorded 3 hours ago, I said, staring directly at my father. That is conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, and malicious intent to inflict bodily harm. Marcus backed away, shaking his head. It is a deepfake. He screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. It is AI. She fabricated it. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. The time for lies is over, Marcus. Detective Vance strode into the room. He was flanked by 6 uniformed officers. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his badge and a look of grim satisfaction. He marched down the center aisle, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. Marcus King Vance announced, his voice booming without a microphone. Marcus stumbled back, knocking over the podium where he had given his speech. No, you can't be here. This is a private event. Vance stepped onto the stage. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest, Mr. King. What? For what? Marcus shrieked, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Vance grabbed Marcus's arm, spinning him around. We can start with the federal charges: tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement of employee pension funds. And thanks to the recording your daughter just provided, we are adding conspiracy to kidnap and kidnapping by fraud. The cuffs clicked shut. The sound was louder than the applause Marcus had received earlier. You have the right to remain silent, Vance recited, pushing Marcus forward. Though I highly suggest you start using it, because your daughter has provided us with terabytes of evidence. The flashing lights of the press cameras went into a frenzy. They captured every moment of the King Patriarch being dragged off the stage. His tuxedo rumpled, his face a mask of ruin. As Marcus was hauled away, screaming that he was innocent, chaos erupted at the side of the stage. Brad, who had picked himself up from the floor, saw the police. He saw his father-in-law in chains. and his survival instinct cowardly as it was kicked in. He bolted. He scrambled toward the side exit, pushing past a waiter knocking a tray of champagne glasses to the floor. "Out of my way," Brad shouted. "I didn't do anything. It was all him." He reached the emergency exit door and slammed his shoulder against the push bar. It didn't budge. Stone had locked down the perimeter. Brad pounded on the door, frantic. "Let me out! Open this door!" He turned around to see two security guards closing in on him. He looked for another way out. He looked at the stage. He looked at me. I stood at the podium watching him like a scientist observing a rat in a maze. "Going somewhere, Brad?" I asked. Brad looked at me, his eyes wild. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You can't pin this on me. I was just an employee. I just did what Marcus told me. I didn't sign anything." I picked up the microphone again. "Actually, Brad, you are right. You didn't sign anything. But you are wrong about one thing." I held up a piece of paper that Stone had just handed me. It was a printout of an email. "You are not just an employee, you are a scapegoat." Brad stopped panting. What? I looked at the paper. "This is an email sent to the district attorney's office 5 minutes ago. It is from Chloe." Brad's jaw dropped. "Chloe? She is in the dressing room right now, giving a statement to the police." I continued, my voice calm and clear. "She claims she knew nothing about the embezzlement. She claims she was a victim of her father's manipulation, and to prove her innocence, she just handed over the hard drive from your laptop, the one where you stored the plans to liquidate the company assets into crypto." "No," Brad whispered. "She wouldn't. We are married." I smiled. It was a cold, pitying smile. "She is a king, Brad. We don't have loyalty. We have survival instincts. She threw you to the wolves to save herself. She told the police you were the mastermind behind the pension theft." Brad screamed. It was a sound of pure betrayal. "That lying witch! It was her idea." "She wanted the money for the jewelry." Detective Vance signaled to two officers. They moved toward Brad. Bradley Pearson Vance said, "You are under arrest for securities fraud and grand larceny." Brad tried to run again, dodging to the left, but he ran straight into the solid wall of chest that was Marcus Stone. Stone didn't even flinch. He just grabbed Brad by the collar of his cheap suit and lifted him off the ground. "Get your hands off me," Brad yelled, kicking his legs in the air. "I want a lawyer. I want immunity. I can testify against." Marcus Stone slammed him back down to the floor and zip-tied his hands behind his back. Brad was dragged past the stage, weeping, begging for a deal. He passed me, and for a second our eyes met. "Zuri, please, sticking up for you. I told them to be nice." I looked down at him. "You told them to put me in a garage, Brad." I tapped the microphone. "You are fired." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the second member of the family was removed from the building. The stage was empty now except for me. The red screen behind me still glowed with the notice of seizure. I looked out at the audience. The mayor was gone. The investors were on their phones frantically calling their brokers. The party was over. The dynasty was dead. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different. It didn't taste like perfume and money anymore. It tasted like ash. But it was clean ash. It was the ash of a fire that had burned away the rot. I stepped away from the podium. My legs felt heavy, but my spirit felt light. I walked down the stairs not as a victim, not as a daughter, but as a survivor. I had one more person to deal with. The one who had turned me in. The one who was currently hiding in the dressing room thinking she had made a deal with the devil to save her skin. Chloe. I signaled to Stone. "Bring the car around," I said. "We are going to the station. I want to make sure my sister understands the terms of her new lease." Stone nodded. "And the guests?" he asked. I looked back at the ballroom one last time. "Tell them the open bar is closed." I walked out of the service entrance into the cool night air. The sirens were wailing in the distance, a lullaby for the wicked. I had won. But the game wasn't quite over yet. I had to make sure the final piece of the puzzle fit perfectly. I had to make sure Chloe knew that betraying her husband didn't mean she escaped the queen. 30 days is a long time in the business world. In 30 days, you can merge companies. You can bankrupt a nation. Or in my case, you can erase a dynasty. The morning air in Chicago was crisp, carrying the scent of the lake and heavy machinery. I stood on the sidewalk across the street from the building that used to be the crown jewel of my father's empire. The downtown commercial tower. It was a monolith of black glass and steel that dominated the skyline. For 40 years, the name King Estates had been emblazoned across the entrance in gold lettering. It was a name that commanded fear and respect. Today, it was just scrap metal. I watched as the crane operator lowered the letter K onto the flatbed truck. It hit the metal bed with a hollow, deafening clang. It looked smaller down here on the ground. Rusty. Cheap. Just like the man who put it there. Ms. King? I turned. The foreman was holding a clipboard looking nervous. The old signage is down. The crew is ready to install the new branding. Do you want to approve the alignment before we bolt it in? I looked up at the empty facade. It looked clean. It looked ready. Proceed, I said. And make sure it is straight. I want it visible from the highway. I watched as the new letters were hoisted into the air. They were not gold. They were platinum. Sleek, modern, and unyielding. Zuri Group. No fathers. No husbands. No family names to hide behind. Just me. I signed the foreman's clipboard and walked to my car. I had 2 more stops to make before I could close the book on this chapter of my life. The first stop was a high-end consignment shop on Oak Street. It was the kind of place where wealthy women quietly sold their jewelry when their husbands got indicted or their affairs got expensive. I did not go there to shop. I went there to witness. Through the display window I saw her. Chloe. She was not wearing sequins today. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked tired. She was standing at the counter, arguing with the appraisal manager. On the counter between them lay a pile of designer handbags, the very same bags I had carried for her just a month ago. I pushed the door open. The bell chimed. Chloe spun around. When she saw me, she froze. Her hand went to her throat, instinctively covering a necklace that was no longer there. Zuri, she whispered. I walked to the counter. The manager looked at me, then back at Chloe, sensing the tension. Ms. King, the manager said, nodding to me. Do you know this woman? She is trying to tell me this Birkin is worth 20,000. I told her without the original receipt and box, I can only give her 4. I looked at the bag. It was the orange one. The one that had carried the recording device that destroyed her life. It is authentic, I said calmly. My sister has excellent taste in spending other people's money. Chloe flushed a deep, angry red. I do not need your help, Zuri. She turned back to the manager, her voice shaking. Fine. Take it. 4,000. Just give me the cash. The manager counted out the bills. Chloe snatched them, stuffing them into her pocket. She grabbed her coat and tried to storm past me, but I stepped into her path. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was bruised. But the hate was still there, burning bright in her eyes. Are you happy? She hissed. I am living in a studio apartment in the suburbs. Brad is facing 5 years in prison because I testified against him. I have to sell my clothes to pay for a lawyer. Is this what you wanted? I adjusted the cuff of my blazer. I didn't want this, Chloe. I wanted a sister. I wanted a family. You chose the clothes. You chose the money. I just let you keep what you valued most. I stepped aside, letting her pass. Chloe stopped at the door, her hand on the handle. Dad asks about you, she said softly, not looking back. He thinks you are going to come for him. He thinks you are going to save him. I stared at the back of her head. The bank is closed, Chloe. She walked out into the cold, disappearing into the crowd of strangers. She was just another face now. No longer a princess. Just a woman trying to survive the winter. I got back into my car. The final stop was the hardest, but it was the most necessary. The Metropolitan Correctional Center was a gray concrete fortress in the heart of the city. It was cold, sterile, and smelled of industrial cleaner and misery. I sat in the visitation room on the other side of the thick plexiglass. I waited. 5 minutes later, the door buzzed open. Marcus King shuffled in. He looked 20 years older. His silver hair was thin and unkempt. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame. He sat down heavily, picking up the phone receiver. I picked up mine. "Zuri," he breathed. His voice was raspy, weak. "Thank God. I knew you would come. You have to get me out of here. The lawyers are idiots. They say I am looking at 15 years. You have money, Zuri. You have connections. Make a donation to the judge's re-election campaign. Fix this." I looked at him through the glass. Even in prison, he was trying to bribe his way out. He had learned nothing. "I cannot fix this, Marcus. You broke the law. You stole from the people who trusted you." He slammed his hand against the glass. "I did it for the family, for you." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You did it for your ego. You were willing to lock me in a cage to protect your image. You were willing to erase me." Marcus slumped back in his chair, tears forming in his eyes. "I am your father, Zuri." "Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means you gave me life," I said. "And then you tried to take it away." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single piece of paper. I pressed it against the glass so he could read it. "What is this?" He squinted. "It is a receipt," I said. He read the lines. "St. Jude's Behavioral Health Center. Patient account Marcus King. Prepayment for long-term residential care. Term 10 years. "I don't understand," he whispered. I leaned in close to the glass. "You wanted someone to go to St. Jude's, Marcus. You said it was a place to rest. You said it was for the best." "Well, I agreed with you." I pulled the paper back. "I spoke to the judge. I told him about your confusion, your delusions of grandeur, your history of pathological lying. I offered to pay for your treatment in a private, secure facility instead of federal prison." The judge agreed it was a compassionate sentence. Marcus's eyes widened in horror. "No. No, Zuri. That place is a madhouse. You can't put me in there? I am not crazy." I stood up. "That is exactly what I said, Marcus." But no one listened. I hung up the phone. Marcus started screaming. He pounded on the glass, screaming my name, begging me to stop. The guards moved in, pulling him away from the window. I watched as he was dragged back through the heavy steel door, kicking and screaming, just like he had planned for me. I walked out of the prison. The heavy metal doors clanged shut behind me, sealing the tomb. I stepped out into the sunlight. It was blindingly bright. I walked to my car where Stone was waiting. He opened the door for me. "Where to, Ms. King?" he asked. I looked at the skyline. I saw the crane in the distance finishing the installation of the Zuri group sign. It shone like a beacon. "Home, Stone. Take me home." I settled into the leather seat as the car merged onto Lakeshore Drive. The lake was vast and blue, stretching out to the horizon. For 32 years, I had defined myself by who I was to them. The disappointed daughter, the invisible sister, the cash cow, the scapegoat. I had let them write my story. I had let them edit my worth. But today the ink was dry. The contract was terminated. I rolled down the window, letting the wind whip through my hair. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt like my own. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They are wrong. Revenge is not a dish, it is a mirror. It forces people to look at their own ugly reflections until they break. I didn't destroy my family. I just held up the mirror and let them destroy themselves. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a survivor. I saw a woman who owned her past, her present, and her future. My name is Zuri, no longer a king, just Zuri, and that is more than enough. Zuri's journey teaches us a brutal but beautiful truth. Your worth is never defined by the people who fail to value you, even if they share your blood. We often waste years seeking validation from those who only see us as a resource, not a person. But true freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for an apology that will never come and start building the life you deserve. The strongest foundations are often built on the very rocks they threw at you. If you have ever had to be your own hero against the people who should have protected you, hit like and subscribe. Share your story of breaking free in the comments below.